Well, it depends on the plan that you're following. I mean,
Right.
if you're gonna be aggressive with fat loss, then I recommend a starch and a fruit only for women on a deplete day, or I mean on a carb up day
Okay.
in the post workout window. If
Right.
you're a man, I recommend two starches and a fruit in the post workout window, and that's just anywhere from 1 to 4 hours after the workout, where our metabolic systems are more active. The muscles are kind of like a sponge in that post-workout window. It's been drained dry, and they want to suck up nutrients. So that's the time you want to consume that. So that would be for aggressive fat loss.
Right.
Now, if we're more into a maintenance phase, or we're just trying to steadily lose weight, that could be increased depending on the person's weight and
Sure.
how much body fat they have. But in
Sure.
general, that's a good guideline to follow if you want to burn some fat.
Yeah, but like one carb being like about 30 grams, like a serving or something like that.
Yeah, I always tell people, a fist, a good size, a
Yeah.
fist of carbs. So that's a piece of fruit, and that's going to be a cup of rice, or
Right.
two small baked potatoes, or maybe a big one. A cup and a half of squash. And if you're over 200 pounds and you don't have a lot of body fat, obviously you can increase that. So there's a lot of variables depending on the person, but in general, that's a good guideline to follow. Is just the fist. Use the
Right.
fist in the workout window.
Beautiful, Shaun. So hey, before we move on to doing some exercise, because you have some interesting things that you talk about in terms of intervals and cardio, I wanted to talk to you a little bit more about that white rice thing, because people oftentimes, when I tell them to eat white rice, they freak out. They're like, I can eat white rice? I thought I was supposed to eat only brown rice and wild rice and all this stuff. So what is the difference between white rice and brown rice, and how come people can actually probably get better results by eating white rice than brown rice?
So here's the take on brown or black rice versus white. First of all, if the goal is to keep insulin stable and to keep the body in a fat burning environment, and you're not consuming the rice around exercise, brown or black rice is going to be a better choice
Right.
because it has more fiber and it has a lower glycemic index, and the goal would be to keep blood sugar stable and low. When insulin levels are elevated, which happens from carb intake, then you can't burn fat. So the whole goal is to combine that rice with the lean protein and maybe some friendly fats and some veggies and keep insulin stable. However, in the post-workout window, things change completely. The goal is totally different, right? Insulin is a storage hormone. 90% of the time, we want to keep it stable and low to keep our body in a fat-burning environment. However, in the post-workout window, it's the one time we want to intentionally spike insulin because it is a storage hormone. So it will store those carbs into muscle tissue after the workout. Now, if you consume brown or black rice in your post-workout in place of white rice, is that going to make or break your plan? Absolutely not. But many times, the brown rice and the black rice can be more problematic than the white rice because it has a gluten and a lectin component in it.
Right.
The
Yeah.
white rice doesn't. When they process the white rice, they remove everything so that all that is left is pure starch. Now, 90% of the time, that's not going to be a good choice, especially if you're not an exerciser. But if you're a high-intensity exerciser, that is the best fuel that you can use to fuel your body's ability to utilize carbs more efficiently and burn more belly fat. So with brown rice, they don't remove all the outer component and process it to the pure starch. So some of the fiber content is still left. So that's from a diabetic standpoint or an insulin stability standpoint. In defense of brown rice, that's where it works best. But that gluten and lectin component can also be problematic, unlike the white rice,
Right.
which is glucose, pure glucose. And our bodies have used pure glucose since the caveman days. So if you're an exerciser, white rice is your friend, not your enemy.
Absolutely. And who doesn't like sushi for a post-workout meal, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
So let's dig into exercise a little bit, Shaun. So one of the things that struck out to me when I was reading your book was looking at how you did interval training mixed with low-intensity cardio, and then bookended it with some more interval training. What's the concept behind this? Because I know a lot of people go out there and they just think, oh, I'm going to do 15 minutes, but then what happens? Like all the fat is in the blood and everything, and then it just reattaches if they don't continue to burn off. So tell us a little bit about that.
It's interesting, and it works best when you have already lost some weight and you're down to the last stubborn stuff. So again, as we have this conversation, we're going to be talking about stubborn fat, and this is
Right.
rapid. This is about rapid fat loss. So this isn't about long term. I mean, this technique that I'm going to share right now is very powerful and it works. But it's just like any good technique. You can't abuse it and overdo it because you'll stress out your adrenal glands.
Right.
So the whole concept behind interval training, obviously, a short, hard burst of high-intensity exercise lasting anywhere between 20 all the way up to maybe 45 seconds and even as long as a minute at times. But what happens is when you engage in these short, hard bursts that are shorter in duration, particularly 10 to 30 seconds, you work a system called the creatine phosphate system. And this system, when activated properly through high intensity intervals or burst, releases fat burning hormones. These fat burning hormones, in the form of adrenaline, will basically attach themselves to stubborn pockets of fat. And keep in mind that when you get down to the last 10 or 15 pounds of fat, the issue that you have is blood flow. It's very difficult to get blood to flow into stubborn pockets of fat. And without blood flow, there is no fat burning. What these intervals will do is they'll create blood flow in those stubborn pockets of fat, so the adrenaline can work its magic by actually breaking apart these stubborn pockets of fat. And then what will happen is the body will release these stubborn pockets of fat as in the form of free fatty acids into the bloodstream. Okay. Now at this point in time, most people stop their workout and they go about their day. Now, in theory, what can happen is a process called reesterification. And I think that it's not going to be an issue with overweight people, but I think with stubborn fat, the results speak for themselves. What ends up happening is if you walk away or cool down, that free fatty acids can actually resettle into other areas of your body and store as fat. So in theory, when you're done with these intervals, it only makes sense to engage in a moderate intensity or a lower intensity steady state cardio to prevent this reesterification and burn off these free fatty acids that are floating around in the bloodstream. So that's kind of the theory behind, if anybody's ever heard of like Lyle McDonald, he wrote a book called The Stubborn Fat Protocol, which is a very, very scientific analysis of this. So if you're a science geek, it's a good book to read, but it doesn't teach you how to apply it. So what I've done is I've used that protocol or something similar to it, and I've made it a little more advanced, and I've expanded upon it and experimented on it. And I use it in conjunction with my macro patterning nutrition plan to really let them feed each other so that you really can get a synergistic effect and burn and actually legitimately target stubborn pockets of fat.
Right. That's fantastic, Shaun. So basically what you're saying is, you do interval training, you release the free fatty acids, and if you go back and sit down on your desk, some of them will burn off, but some of them might just reattach back on your body. And so you kind of shoot yourself in the foot and don't get the results you quite want. But if you engage in some low intensity cardio after your interval training, then you can have an opportunity to burn those free fatty acids off and actually get rid of that stubborn fat. Is that correct?
Exactly. So I would recommend, 20 to 30 minutes of steady state, but even 10 minutes will help. And then there's another advanced protocol beyond that where we take it to the next level for people who are trying to really get lean. And that is we'll add some strategic intervals, some longer, what we call threshold intervals at the end. And threshold intervals are just a bit longer in length. They'll be anywhere from like 60 seconds all the way up to a couple minutes in length. So you have to pace yourself differently. So it's harder and faster than steady state cardio, but it's lower intensity than the short, hard 20 to 30 second burst. And what this does is it really allows your body to burn off that last little bit of glycogen that may be stored in the muscle and the liver to access more fat as fuel. And it also has been shown in research that when you do these threshold type of intervals, and I recommend just doing a session of them at least once a week, even when you're following any plan, research shows that working that system actually fuels your body's ability to burn more fat when you do lower intensity cardio and the higher intensity short, hard bursts. So by working all three of these metabolic systems, they actually feed each other simultaneously while preventing plateaus. So hopefully that's kind of a dumbed down version. Hopefully that makes sense for your listeners, Tyler.
So you're talking about exercising the creatine phosphate pathway, the glycogen pathway, and then just your general oxidative pathway. So you're doing kind of like the 20 seconds and under, the 90-second-ish range, and then kind of beyond 3 to 5 minutes, right?